Hey everyone, Mr. Harvey here. Let's continue our lecture on Chapter 5, and today we are talking about the Russians. So let's get started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we have not talked about Russia yet in this entire year. You're reading your book, talked a little bit about Russia in Chapter 1, but we didn't cover it because I'm going to cover that actually right now, okay? So before we talk about Russia and we understand Russian culture and the modernization that we're about to see under the Romanovs, Peter the Great, there's a couple important terms and ideas, key terms that we need to know. So let's talk about them. The first term that I want y'all to understand and know is the Tsar. Okay, this word. This is the Russian word for Caesar. Okay, and Russia actually believes that they are the third Rome. Um, the third Rome, the first being Rome, the Roman Empire, the second being the Byzantine Empire, and the third now being Russia. And this is the Russian word for Caesar, and this would be the title for um, a male monarch or emperor. A czarina would be for a female monarch, and we'll see, plenty of female Russian leaders such as Catherine the Great, very famously. But this was used with the monarchy. Okay, czar or czarina. Westernization. All right. This is the adoption of Western ideas, technology, culture, and we are going to see, especially during Peter, the Westernization of Russia. And this is adopting Western ideas from Western Europe, Britain, Netherlands, France, the Germanic lands. Okay, and we are going to see Russia change and westernize, especially under Peter, and we're going to be getting to that later on in this lecture. Autocrat. We talked about this before. This is just someone who rules with unlimited or absolute authority. Just kind of a synonym for absolutism, a synonym for someone who has unlimited power, like almost like a dictator. Okay, an autocrat. Important to know that because the AP exam has in the past used the word autocrat, and some people have been like, wait, what does that mean? All right, this is just another synonym for someone who has absolute authority. All right, a warm water port. This is going to be so important for us. In understanding and learning about what one of the reasons why Peter is going to westernize is something that he seeks and something that he wants in order to establish greater ties with Western Europe is a warm water port, a port that is ice-free all year. And we're going to be talking about Russian geography. We're going to be talking about this large landmass. Well, really with Russia, ladies and gentlemen, they don't have many warm water ports. They are up there in parts of Siberia, up in parts of the Baltic areas, and prior to their acquisition of St. Petersburg, they really didn't have access to a warm water port. And speaking of St. Petersburg, this is going to be an important city that is founded by Peter the Great, St. Petersburg, Peter the Great, and symbolizes Peter's drive in his success in westernizing Russia. Okay, so some important terms for us to understand before we kind of get started and learn about the Russians. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So Russia, ladies and gentlemen, very important for us. It has had a different path than most of the states that we've talked about. Very different history, culturally, ethnically, religiously, linguistically. They are very different from some of the Europeans that we've talked about. They're a Slavic people. They're Greek Orthodox. They are not Catholic. Okay, and they in this time prior to what we're going to be talking about, prior to the 17th century, Russia was primarily a medieval state. They were not influenced by the Renaissance and the Reformation, and largely isolated from Western Europe. But that is about to be changing. They were also really important, ladies and gentlemen, conquered by the Mongols in the 13th century. Brutally and ruthlessly ruled for over 200 years. And this is really important, ladies and gentlemen, as we're going to be talking about the Russians and talking about the development of their state, is that the Russian people themselves are going to be undergoing, through the monarchy, through the Soviets, Stalin, with the Mongols, even with Putin today, brutal regimes, really brutal. And this is going to be really a common theme that we're going to see in their political, social, military development, ladies and gentlemen, is the brutality of some of their leadership. And when we start looking at Russia in the 13th century, they were brutally ruled by the Mongols, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, eventually, one of the ways the Mongols are going to kind of be overthrown and get out, or we're going to see the princes of Moscow consolidate their power and make Moscow a really powerful province within this territory of Russia. And eventually they are going to overthrow the Mongols. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and the first really important monarch that we're going to talk about that's going to rule Moscow is known as Ivan III. And we're going to see Moscow, like I said, in Russia, be considered, a third Rome. All right, and the Russians will consider that, and aka one of the reasons why they use the title of Tsar for their leader. All right, very much influenced by the ancient Romans in the ancient Roman Empire. All right. Another leader who's important for us, and this is not super important for the AP exam, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just kind of giving you some context. In the 1500s is Ivan the Terrible. He's going to be one of the first. He will be the first Russian to take the title of Tsar, and he's going to expand Russian territory in the Baltic area and in the Far East by Siberia. He's going to encourage some trade with England, not on the level that we're going to be seeing with Peter and the Netherlands. And during his reign, ladies and gentlemen, many peasants did not really like him. Okay, hence the name Ivan the Terrible. And they're going to form many free groups and outlaw armies called Cossacks. And we'll talk more about that later, especially when we see the Russian military take shape. All right, a little bit more about Ivan the Terrible is he's going to reduce the power of the nobles. The nobles in Russia are called the boyars. Important for us to understand that, right? A Prussian noble, a Junker, a Russian noble, a boyar. Very important for us. And part of his deal with the nobles, ladies and gentlemen, and this is really important for us. Remember, we talked about this when it comes to Eastern European monarchs and their relationship with the nobility, is that all nobles had to serve the Tsar in order to keep their lands, but the nobles are going to be able to have power over their peasants as serfs. So that trade-off, remember we talked about that trade-off within Eastern Europe, ladies and gentlemen, okay? And we'll see merchants and artisans tied to the land as well, okay? So very important for us to understand that relationship between the lower classes, the nobles, and the monarchy, okay? All right, let's talk about the Romanovs, ladies and gentlemen. This is so important for our class. Take really good notes. Make sure we know this family. It is equal in importance to the Bourbons, the Valois, the Habsburgs, the Tudors, the Stuarts, and so many of those families, the Hohenzollern family, so many of these families that we were talking about. This is the family, the dynasty that is associated with Russia. Okay, so it begins under Michael Romanov, and it's going to last until the Russian Revolution, where the Soviets take over and Lenin takes over in 1917, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Now, they favored the nobles in return for their support, and we're going to see them give favor to the nobles by reducing their military obligations, any duty to the military, and gave them, and this is something we've been talking about, gave them greater control over their peasants as serfs. That was the trade-off in exchange for the support of the nobles, giving them greater control over their serfs, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Now, also, one of the things that we're going to see the Romanov dynasty do is they are going to kind of go and persecute some members of the Orthodox Church of Russia, the Greek Orthodox Church, and we will see old believers be persecuted as newer religious figures start to rise. Okay, and something that's really important for us to understand, ladies and gentlemen, is Greek Orthodox is similar to Catholicism. There's just Greek Orthodox don't believe in a pope. Okay, there are some similar themes between the two, but it's just really important for us. And it's the religious for our class. The specific religious beliefs of Greek Orthodox are not super important. Just understand that Greek Orthodox is different from Catholicism, ladies and gentlemen, and is typically associated with the Russians. Okay, all right, and more Eastern European Europe. All right. And we'll start to see, ladies and gentlemen, within the Romanov dynasty, some Western influence will enter Russia, some ideas, technology, and culture, but we're really going to see that with Peter. Okay, so the Romanov dynasty. Let's continue. All right, got to know this guy right here. Peter the Great. Super important, ladies and gentlemen. All right, one of the most important leaders in Russian history. He is going to be the one to modernize, westernize, bring Russia up to speed with what is going on in Europe, and really bring Russia onto the international stage of interacting with European affairs. Now, he was nearly 7 feet tall, and there's a lot of history behind Peter the Great. He is a very successful leader, very smart, very curious individual. And he had a great pulse on where his country was and what was going on in Europe. And so he is going to be the one who really brings Russia up to speed with the rest of Europe. Okay, now when he was a child, okay, he and his brother, who was really sickly and had some health issues, Ivan V, came to power over a disputed succession, and they shared the crown until Ivan died. Okay, but Peter's gonna really take sole control of the crown. And Peter was really close with his brother. It's gonna really hurt him when his brother dies. He really had a good relationship. He loved his brother, and that really hurt Peter when his brother was unable to overcome his health issues. Now, Peter and his brother were supported by the Streltsy. This was a type of kind of Russian military guard, but very similar, ladies and gentlemen, to Louis XIV. When Peter came to power, when he was young, he saw lots of violence, threats, and danger to his rule. The boyars and some members of the Streltsy, remember this group that was protecting him, some of them were jealous of his power. Some of them, plotted to try to usurp some of his power and take some of that power away. And this really influenced him, much like Louis XIV, who we saw, with the Fronde, have those nobles threaten his power. Similarly, Peter is going to, later on, we're going to see, go after the boyars, all right, and really, in some of his adult policies, he's going to build a strong army, a strong monarchy to protect his power because he knows there are threats to his power. Let's continue. All right, so one of the first things that he knows, and that Peter is curious. He understands. He's seen the boyars and the Streltsy kind of threaten his power, but he also knows what's going on in Europe. He has a great understanding of the political, the military, the economic, the social norms of Europe, and he understands that in order to compete with Britain, France, Prussia, these other areas, that he has got to modernize his army. And so he famously traveled to Western Europe disguised, and he learned all about modern technology, military hardware. He learned all about shipbuilding. He was really curious about that. And he's going to bring a lot of engineers from the Netherlands, from France, from Prussia, from Britain, and bring them back to Russia to teach his own engineers about shipbuilding and teach them the skills so he can modernize his army, modernize his navy, modernize his country. Okay, and that is a huge goal for him, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, now he's going to demand each Russian village be required to send recruits to the army, to the navy, and he is going to not only modernize the army, but he is going to expand the army. All right, 75% of the national budget was spent on the military. That's a lot, ladies and gentlemen. He's going to set up military academies and build this modern navy to challenge Sweden. Not going to be a modern navy to necessarily challenge the might of England, ladies and gentlemen, but he's going to set up this modern navy to challenge Sweden, and we'll be talking about that, especially in the context of the Great Northern War for St. Petersburg. Okay, so let's talk about it. All right. Here's the Baltics, ladies and gentlemen, okay? And here's Russia right here. There's St. Petersburg right there, this Gulf of Finland. Okay, you have Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And here's the Baltics, okay? Here's the Baltics. We are going to see Russia compete with Sweden over this area in the Baltics, and Russia will win, okay? This is the Great Northern War. Sweden dominated this Baltic region. We talked about them in the 30 Years' War. Very innovative, very well efficient and well-developed military. And Russia suffered some humiliating defeats in their fight with Sweden. But after rebuilding the army, Peter is going to defeat the Swedes, won territory in the Baltic Sea, and he gained Latvia, Estonia, but more importantly, and most importantly, he gained his window to the west. He gained his warm water port that is ice-free all year, and that is St. Petersburg. And this is his window to the west, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to help him be able to trade, interact with the Netherlands, England, France. Excuse me. This is going to help him interact with the rest of Western Europe. Super important. This window to the west, this warm water port, St. Petersburg, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Now, he's also going to modernize, ladies and gentlemen, the economy, society. All right? By the end of his reign, Russia's only going to lag behind Germany and Sweden in iron production. He's going to tie the serfs not just to agricultural land, but to factories, okay? He's going to adopt mercantilism. And just like, and Peter is very much influenced by some of the monarchs that he sees, going on in their policies. It's not just the military. I mean, he is on an intellectual, political, social, economic. He is very much trying to mold Russia just like he sees in his understanding of Western Europe. He's gonna, like Louis XIV, rein in the Streltsky, rein in the Boyars, okay? And he's gonna put down the Streltsky rebellion to showcase his power, okay? And he also is gonna modernize and showcase his power over the Boyars by personally attacking their attachment to traditional culture. It was very traditional for a noble to have a long beard. He's going to go up to the nobles. I mean, this is so similar to Louis XIV and showing power over nobles. Peter's going to go up to them and cut their beard and say, give me your beard, and cut it and say, we are changing. We are modernizing. We are westernizing. It is time for us to get up with the times, or we will, not be able to compete. And Peter knew this. Peter knew that if they don't change, if they don't modernize, there are powers out there like France, like England, like eventually Germany, like the Austrians, that could, take them down. And so Peter is changing. He is changing economically, politically, militarily, socially. He is modernizing Russia, ladies and gentlemen. Very important. Okay, let's talk about St. Petersburg, ladies and gentlemen. So the land that he has acquired from this Great Northern War is going to build a new capital, St. Petersburg, and this is his window to the west. This really, ladies and gentlemen, is going to symbolize his efforts to forge a modern, westernized Russia, and he's going to copy Louis XIV, and this just shows his the influence of Western Europe on him by making his own version of Versailles. All right, and that's going to be the Winter Palace, which we're going to look at. But St. Petersburg was I would argue, his crowning achievement. It symbolized Russia's modernization and entrance into Western European affairs. And we're going to see Peter, just like Louis, ladies and gentlemen, there's so many similarities and influences, order the boyars, the nobles, to live there too, just like Louis at Versailles. So St. Petersburg is going to become kind of very similar to Paris and Versailles. I mean, this is Peter. You can see the influence of Western Europe. You can see that influence. All right, and here are some pictures. Beautiful. St. Petersburg is a beautiful city, just gorgeous, and there's so much history there. It's an incredible place. Incredible place. All right, here's a picture that I took, and there's the Winter Palace, and we can see it just across the river. But a beautiful, beautiful place. And this is Peter's version of Versailles. Okay, another picture I took. Just a beautiful place. I wish we could all go there on a field trip. All right. Now, we're also going to see Russia's huge, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it goes all the way from Europe through the Middle East into Asia and in the Pacific. And we're also going to see, ladies and gentlemen, the empire expand east, travel across Siberia, and we're going to see going to the Pacific Ocean. Russia will sign a treaty with China that's going to recognize Russia's claims to lands north of China. All right, and he also, we're going to see Russia hire a Danish explorer who discovered the Bering Strait. And Russia, ladies and gentlemen, will become the largest country in the world, and it is a massive, massive, massive country. But there's a lot of parts of Russia that are uninhabitable. It can get really cold. There's some really gnarly weather. It's not also, some areas are not good for development. It's a massive country, ladies and gentlemen. So they're not just expanding westward, they're expanding eastward as well. All right, let's talk about Peter the Great's government, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, now the Tsar theoretically owned all land in the state. There's no really representative political bodies like a parliament. Okay. And all landowners, the boyars, owed a lifetime of service to the state, and in return, they gained greater control over the serfs. We know that. Now, a really important reform, ladies and gentlemen, that you need to understand, I want to talk about really quickly so you all can get some good notes on it, is this idea of the table of ranks, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be very similar to Germany, Prussia's meritocracy that I was talking about in the last lecture. Now, Peter, he knows, ladies and gentlemen, that he needs talent within his government and in his military. So what he wanted to do, ladies and gentlemen, was draw the nobility into the service of the state, and thus him. And but he wanted it on a meritocracy, this table of ranks. He wanted people not to just, kind of get through their government and, rise to the government based on their name or how much money they have, but he wanted some talent. So what he did in this table was he equated a person's social standing and privilege with his rank in the bureaucracy. So, your privilege, okay, is going to be your rank in the bureaucracy. If you don't have a lot of privilege, you don't have a lot of rank in the bureaucracy. However, in order to advance through the ranks, okay, in order to get more privilege and advance through the rank of the government, you had to advance based on merit. And what Peter was trying to do was create a more educated class of nobles. He wanted talent. He wanted skills. He wanted, he was not focused on those old archaic ways of, privilege by your name or, just knowing someone. Okay, he needs talent in his bureaucracy, in his government, economically, militarily, politically. And so in order to, achieve a higher rank, ladies and gentlemen, all right, in order to achieve a higher rank and therefore a higher privilege in society, you could only advance based on merit. And that was really important, ladies and gentlemen. He is trying to have talent within his government and talent within his nobility and talent, therefore, within his the most important positions of his country, this table of ranks. And in order to be a more prestigious noble, in order to have more privilege, and therefore in order to achieve a higher rank in the bureaucracy, you need to advance based on your skills and your merit. And so nobles are going to go to school. Nobles are going to get educated. Nobles are going to develop their skills in math and in military tactics. Nobles are going to get the skills that he needs in order to put them in positions of government and where they can be successful. This table of ranks. Now, religiously, he's going to achieve also control over the Orthodox Church of Russia. He's going to abolish the patriarch, the head of the Orthodox Church, and establish this holy synod, ladies and gentlemen, which consisted of several bishops headed by someone who's a layman, not associated with the clergy, called a procurator general. And he's going to really establish a control over the church. Okay, and the church would be governed according to the czar's requirements. So very similar to what we've seen some of our other monarchs do, ladies and gentlemen, is he's going to grab control of religion. Very similar to what Louis does. Very similar to what goes on in England. Okay, very similar to what we've seen. He's going to control. He's not going to let a religious figure control religion. No, it's going to be Peter's control. Okay, very important. Okay, let's talk about Peter the Great. Let's talk about his historical significance and legacy. He used terror to enforce his absolute power, much like Louis' secret police, okay? He westernized Russia, expanded their borders through war, exploration, treaties, okay? His policies are going to contribute to the growth of serfdom, which is kind of ironic, ladies and gentlemen. This is a big irony we see within Peter, as he was trying to advance, westernize, modernize, but, his policies are going to contribute to the growth of serfdom because, well, we know this. He had to give the nobles something in order to be able to control them more, and he gave them serfs, okay? And this actually widened the gap between Russia and the West because serfdom is almost non-existent in the West, and Russia, it's going to become more and more and more prominent, which is, the opposite of really this gap between Russia and the West. This is the opposite of what Peter wanted to do, but this is kind of what he had to do in order to control his nobles. So important for us to understand that hypocrisy. And here's a picture I took, ladies and gentlemen. This is where he is buried. Okay, and you can see right here, there's a statue of him. So this is his burial in St. Petersburg. This is where he is buried. Peter the Great. This is the actual, I believe, church of where he is buried. Okay, I'm not too sure of the name. I'll have to look that up. This is the cathedral where he is buried. All right, and here are some other caskets. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure the monarchs, but these are where some other monarchs. This is a monarch and his wife, where they are buried. Okay, and that is it for our lecture today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. All right, and for the next lecture, we're going to talk about Baroque art. Thank you so much.